Hi, this is my second video in this question to Peter Schiff series. In the first video, I just introduced the idea that even though capitalism and free markets have many virtues, they cannot be an ideal system and that they can also have some drawbacks. In this video, I will explain what I understand of Peter Schiff's position. Peter is all for capitalism, low taxes, free trade and private property. I understand that about half of all that Peter has been saying so far has to do with criticizing the government's efforts to stimulate the economy, saying that it will lead to unmitigated disaster. This includes criticizing lower interest rates, bailout of incompetent companies, and speculating risk takers, easy credit policy, and encouragement of consumer spending by the government. However, all this has been going on for several years now. The government bailed out the hedge fund long-term capital management in 1998, 10 years ago. Alan Greenspan had lowered interest rates coupled with easy credit policy, thus engineering housing market boom a few years ago. But please note that when the government was doing all this, it was in response to the expected economic crisis. So these government actions cannot cause the economic problems. Government was trying to manage the economic situation to avoid the downturn in the economy that they expected. And they did succeed temporarily if we look back at the booming stock market, the strong consumer demand, and housing boom merely about a couple years ago. While the government took all these measures with the short-term view that it will stimulate the economy, Peter took the other side of the argument, saying that these same measures that in the short term are stimulating the economy and avoiding the downturn will in the long term eventually lead to an even worse economic disaster. Now we know that both the government as well as Peter were right. However, the government was foolish to take the short-term view and Peter was wise to take the long-term view. But please note that all this was only a government response to expected economic problems. They did manage to postpone and worsen the crisis that eventually happened anyway and would have come 10 years ago had the government not acted in the way that it did. The other half of what Peter has been saying is about explaining what caused the economic downturn. He has mentioned several things to explain the economic downturn. One, that America came off the gold standard and embraced fiat currency. Two, that the people, the government, and the corporations have been taking on too much of debt. Three, that America is producing very little but consuming a lot. Four, that the Americans have not been saving and now they rely on the savings of the Asians for any new capital. Now my question to Peter is, what is the driving force behind these things? What is causing all of this? This leads to where I do not agree with Peter. Peter simply blames everything on the government. I think that blaming the government for everything is like having such a blind and deep faith in a system that you are not even willing to look at any possible drawbacks in it. Just blaming everything on the government is so easy. But what I understand is that some of the same things like capitalism, low taxes, free trade, and private property that Peter favors and which do lead to seemingly healthy and sound economy in the early phase eventually leads to the economic problems that Peter simply wants everybody to suffer, and the government try to avoid with its disastrous actions. One reason why so many mainstream economists do not agree with Peter, I think, is because his solution is to simply suffer the economic downturn so that the economy can start again from a low point. However, Peter is not worried about, or probably he doesn't even understand, that if we simply suffer the economic downturn and start again with the same ingredients like capitalism, low taxes, free trade and private property, then we will be doomed again to go through the same cycle of seemingly healthy and sound economy in the early phase and then economic problems in the later phase. Probably, in Peter's view, the boom and the bust are part of the system, and he wants everybody to just accept it and suffer it without any question. I want to question Peter Schiff. Why? Now, the key point that I have made in this video is that the eventual economic problems like the one we are seeing right now is actually an inherent part of the system of capitalism, low taxes, free trade and private property, and that it cannot be escaped. It has happened several times in the past and it is happening again now. Once we suffer the economic problem and economy clears itself of the excesses, it will start at a low point again, and it will take a few generations of economic activity to reach this stage when it will happen again. This is the same 60-year economic cycle that Dr. Ravi Batra, an economics professor, talks about, and that I mentioned in my previous video too. In my next video, I will try to link capitalism, low taxes, free trade and private property with the current economic problems and discuss how these might have contributed to bring on this economic crisis. That is all for today. Thanks.